When clarity matters most, Northgene makes legal DNA testing simple and reliable. Our accredited tests deliver accurate, court-admissible results, helping family lawyers and their clients resolve matters quickly and confidently. Learn more at northgene.co.uk.
You're listening to the Today's Family Lawyer podcast, the leading source of daily news and insight for family law practitioners in England and Wales. Sign up to our free weekly newsletter at todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk and subscribe to hear all the latest news and views from across the family law sector. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Hello, welcome along to the latest Today's Family Lawyer podcast. Today we are talking about a topic in the run-up to Christmas that a number of family law professionals may well come across and may well be currently supporting clients with, which is around maintaining abstinence when it comes to alcohol and substance abuse. And we've got on the podcast today Sophie Lawrence and Donna Muldoon from LexTox to talk about how they and how family law professionals can support clients at a time of year that might be described as triggering, especially in the run-up to Christmas. In the first instance, I find it useful to provide some context to the discussion, to hear from you both as to what your roles are and what you do at LexTox before we dive into the discussion, and indeed what LexTox do for the uninitiated. So Donna, perhaps in the first instance you might give us a little bit of information about yourself and your role. You've been on the podcast before as well.
I have, so it's my second time. Thank you for inviting me back.
You must have done a good job the first time.
Well, hopefully I'll do another good job, so thank you very much. So yeah, LexTox was established in 2011. We're a UK-based accredited testing company supporting family law, drug and alcohol, and also offer DNA testing. So we're part of the Eurofins group, who have over 35 years of innovations in testing for life, comprising of over 950 laboratories across 60 countries. So I'm Donna Muldoon. I'm the reporting manager at LexTox. I'm a forensic toxicologist with over 21 years experience of working in forensic drugs laboratories. And I've specialised in the examination of hair samples for drugs and alcohol markers for just over 17 years now. And ultimately my role here at LexTox is to interpret the results and provide that interpretation for the courts and all the legal professionals within the testing.
Fab, thank you. Last time you were on the podcast, we were talking about hair strand testing from memory. So it's a slightly different topic of discussion this time. Sophie,
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind doing the same, please.
I'm Sophie Lawrence. I'm a client manager with LexTox. Been with the company just shy of 5 years now, and I am client manager. So my area is kind of Southeast Wales, covering up to Mid Wales. My job is to be the one point of contact, if you like, for clients, be it, in the legal sector, so solicitors, paralegals, the social workers as well, just to try and, we understand how busy and how big the workload is for all of our clients. My job is to try and make it a little bit easier, just to, take instruction and move things along in relation to any type of testing.
Thank you. Well, as I say, we're talking about a particular time of year, I think, really, as I say, run up to Christmas, and how services like yours support family law professionals. I mean, in the first instance, Donna, tell us about this scenario of people who are struggling with substance abuse, perhaps struggling with alcohol at a time of year that can be quite challenging, and how services like yours support both them and also family law professionals.
Absolutely. So, like you've just touched upon, the festive period is fast approaching, and it is a very difficult time of year for, almost everybody. And it is very challenging for individuals, and it really does intensify those emotions. And I think, like you just said earlier, it can trigger the past events. So we do offer that testing over that festive period, especially. So two of the products and sort of services we can offer for that client, for you to help those clients on that journey, not only just abstinence but also reduction, to then ultimately get to that abstinence are the breath test, which tests for alcohol consumption, and also the drug patch offering. So that essentially can test the donor, and it will identify if there have been any sort of relapses or if a donor has used. And I think the unique properties of both of those tests is that they are sort of ongoing. So while during that festive period, you're not necessarily seeing your clients maybe as often over those periods. So they have got that testing regime that they have on them. And we've also had the feedback as well that it acts as a deterrent almost. So we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But the drug patch itself is actually worn by your clients. So it is that constant reminder. And like I say, the feedback we've had is that it is a deterrent if they do have those challenges. Similarly, regards to the breath test as well, it is a little portable device that they do have. So they are in possession of that. So there is that constant reminder, even in the challenging times, if they find themselves sort of alone and struggling with potential relapses.
I think most listeners will probably be pretty familiar with a breath test. That's pretty standard, isn't it, Donna? But what's the patch? What's the drug patch, and how does that work?
So the drug patch has been used in the United States for about 30 years. So it's not new testing. However, it is new within the UK court family systems. So LexTox are the only company that offer this. So essentially, it is an absorbent pad. So a lot of us, we all understand that we do sweat. Like we say, we've got the normal sweat that we, typically from our armpits, forehead if we get hot. But there is insensible perspiration that not everyone may be aware of. And that's sort of the sweat that we're not necessarily aware of, that we excrete from everywhere on our bodies. So that absorbent pad is typically worn on the upper arm, and it's essentially it's worn for 7 to 10 days, and that is continuously absorbing that almost invisible sweat that we didn't really know that we excreted. So during that time, if there is any drug use, that essentially is eliminated from our bodies via the sweat as well. So that absorbent pad that donor is using is collecting any sweat. If there are traces of drugs in your sweat, in other words, you have been using it, that pad is going to collect those drugs. Now, what happens is we will go and remove that pad, the absorbent pad from the donor. Then we will send that off to the testing laboratory that is based in the UK. And they will then test that patch itself for any drugs and metabolites. And then that gives the indication for the period of wear, and typically potentially up to 2 days as well prior to that patch being worn. It can then identify if there has been any drug use.
And that, what you would describe as the chain of custody, is really critical, isn't it? We talked about that in the last podcast. Just refresh listeners on that timeline.
Absolutely. So, these results, we'll know we're ending up in the court of law. So the chain of custody absolutely has to be robust for those results to be meaningful. So when the patch is fitted to the donors, they are fitted by trained collectors who will complete a chain of custody paperwork, basically identifying the donor in the first instance. And all of the patches have the unique reference numbers. When the patch is applied to the donor, a photograph of that patch then in situ is taken. And when the collector then goes out a period of 7 to 10 days later to then remove that patch, that chain of custody paperwork is completed, both signed by the collectors themselves and the donors. And again, a photograph of that patch is taken prior to it being removed. So we've got the full chain of custody in regards to the patch itself, and then the results that are obtained from the testing of the patch.
And Sophie, give us some scenarios in which this type of testing is particularly helpful and useful for family professionals.
Of course. So, one particular case which comes to mind, again, one of my local authority clients, they were dealing with a family. So mum and dad had just found out they were expecting a little baby boy. Both parents struggled with kind of substance abuse, namely amphetamine was the drug that they struggled with. Mum had 3 children already. All 3 children were in care due to kind of, living situations and previous history. When it was kind of, mum and dad found out that they were expecting baby. The case was obviously referred, to social services. Case landed on my client, which would be the social worker, on their desk, and they could see that this was kind of, a high risk case. The whole, scenario with the background, the substance abuse issues, and parents had said, that they were abstinent. However, they had no way of kind of proving and showing that they actually were. When social services were then kind of in discussions with mum and dad's legal representatives, they had heard that we had, just launched Drug Patch. It just kind of all came about at the right time. And they saw that it would kind of be, a good way of showing, this could be the tool that would show that, mum and dad are abstinent and be a tool for that. So we were able then to kind of set up I think in this case it was a 20-week package. So all the packages that we do with the Drug Patch are bespoke to each kind of, client to their needs. So this particular one, we did a 20-week package, and I kind of liaised then with local authority, mum and dad, to, get the patches changed every 10 or so days, helping with the Drug Patch, showing that they are, abstinent. What was kind of nice to know is at the end of all of this, then they were able to show and, basically prove that what they were saying was correct. Mm-hmm. And baby, thankfully, then, was able to stay in mum and dad's care, and the court process was kind of avoided as well. Social service interaction wasn't needed in the end. So it was a kind of, a happy story all in all, to be honest.
I always struggle with the extent to which the family lawyer and somebody like yourself, has to get involved in these sorts of scenarios. I mean, at the end of the day, the onus has to be on the parents to follow the procedures and do what they need to do. I mean, it's a really difficult kind of balancing act on your side as well, to make sure that you're there to support, but at the same time you maintain that professional distance. You've got a role to play and you understand what that role is.
Absolutely. I think that's kind of one of the biggest things with ourselves is we are independent. A lot of the time we don't get to know kind of background of cases or things like that. We literally just get the instruction to say, this is the testing that is needed. What is the best service that you can give us for this, to help our client? So that is always, a bit of a not sticking point, but I suppose for our collectors it can sometimes be difficult because, like on this case, they're going out to see these parents, once a week or so, and they're, trying to remain impartial, but obviously they get to know these people as well.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
You must get scenarios where the local authority or social services or the profession comes to you and says, look, I've got this situation. I kind of need some advice on what the best course of action is, how we can best support this family, what tools are available to us. Is that a conversation that happens on a regular basis?
Yeah, day to day. I mean, I say day to day, kind of hour to hour, to be honest. That is, a lot of the time they know that unfortunately parents are struggling with, substance abuse, alcohol dependency, that type of thing. Our job is to kind of show them the services that we can offer and what would best benefit them and also, the family, depending on their needs, whether that be the hair testing, to show historic usage, or like, the products that we're talking about today, kind of real time, if you like, abstinence, kind of fitting it into what they need.
And I think to touch upon that as well, I think you just mentioned, David, as well, your clients, as Sophie's just touched upon. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know what types of, people that they are. And the breath test and the Drug Patch really are geared up for those engaged donors who really, really are on that journey, who are willing and wanting to prove that their abstinence and their journey and their turnaround. Because like I say, ultimately these devices are in, with them. So it is only going to work, if those donors are engaged, and yourselves are going to be the people that know that, not us.
One of the big talking points that we covered off in the last discussion, Donna, was the attitude of the court toward testing, and the fact that hair testing in particular had its limitations. It was great in some senses, but it had its limitations. There's a lesson for the court here in terms of understanding that it's not a silver bullet, that it has to be taken in the context and in the round of the whole of the discussion and the debate. We have the same scenario here, presumably, where this isn't 100%, or is this 100%? Is this a little bit more secure in inverted commas than hair testing, as an example?
Mhm. No, absolutely. We should always be using these forms of tests with as much information as possible. The courts shouldn't be making those decisions just on a single piece of evidence. But, the main premise of these tests are to support abstinence. Therefore, it is a little bit more clear cut than hair in regards to if we are seeing those positive results, that then infers that the abstinence hasn't occurred. There are considerations that we need to factor in when we issue these results and for yourselves to be aware of when you present the results to court. So, in regards to the drug patch, you do need to be comfortable, and the courts and yourselves need to be satisfied that there hasn't been any sort of tampering or sort of trying to manipulate that patch, for example, because again, the donors are wearing them. You don't have sight of what the donors are doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So yourselves and the courts really do need that confidence that, they have been compliant during that process. So like I say, there are many things that we do. We take the photographs. They will assess the patches. So the patch itself, there's also a protective overlay that protects it from, exposure and things in the environment. So again, when that overlay is removed, we'll take a photograph of it. They will visually assess for things like pinpricks or holes to make sure that, nothing has been injected or popped into that patch to try and really mask those results. It'll also as well, we'll check that it's still in situ in the right place on the arm. So all of those checks just give the validity to the results so that you know that what you're providing to court then is accurate reflection of what your donors have or have not done.
You mentioned in one of your previous responses that these patches provide real-time response. I mean, go back again to the hair testing conversation we had where we talked about providing that timeline over a period of months, and given, for example, challenges we have in court delays, that kind of thing. What challenges do we have here in terms of the speed of the turnaround of the results against the usage of drugs or alcohol, and then actually being able to put in the hands of the lawyer and the court information that might exonerate somebody, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So both the drug and the breath test are essentially, real-time monitoring, and you get those results far quicker. So if you've got a scenario, for example, of somebody who has been using historically and regularly, you're all probably aware that hair testing, it can take 4, sometimes up to 6 months for your donor to show that completely not detected or negative result. Now, we know the court's timescales. The ideal is that the cases are done and dusted within the 26 weeks. Or you may have clients who are actually going through mediation who aren't even at that court, and you're trying to prove very quickly to other parties that your client has turned that corner and that they are abstinent. So hair testing might not be your go-to test. So these really are a very quick way for you and your client to demonstrate that they have stopped using, and you do get those negative results almost instantaneous, so that you can provide to the courts and other parties very quickly the change in pattern of use. And certainly with the breath test as well, it's almost immediate. So we can set up the real-time email alerts. So when your donor has provided that test, because they have a very bespoke testing pattern, if they're doing 6 tests a day, for example, they will have that time slot. They have the text message to their phone to alert them that they have to provide the breath sample. They will give that breath test, and you as the professional, the legal professional, will be emailed within 2 to 3 minutes of that test. So again, it's really critical to get those results almost instantaneous, especially over the festive period when you want to be notified immediately, really, if there are any relapses.
We're fast moving towards the end of the time we have for the discussion, and I guess really just want to wrap up the podcast with some scenarios, some situations in which the various different types of testing that's offered through services like yours is most appropriate. And that kind of comes back to one of the questions we had before around, you must get asked these questions on a regular basis. How do you decipher and decide which is the most appropriate test and or combination of tests for the client given the circumstances?
So from a client manager point of view, from my point of view, a lot of the time we get testing via court order. So whatever the court essentially instructs, we will complete. I mean, where that can sometimes differ is where we get instruction from local authority. A lot of the time it can be kind of just actually having a conversation with our client, finding out what it is they actually want to show or what they actually want to prove. I mean, it could be as simple as they've got a parent and they're saying categorically I'm not using. They essentially may just want to prove a point that I'm not doing anything, where from that point then kind of drug patch or breathalyzer would be the right option to show that real time to kind of prove or disprove, if you like, that what they're saying matches up. Where it could be in the court side of things, like I mentioned, we get court orders. They are majority of the time looking at the historic. So that was where kind of hair testing would come in, because they're looking at kind of the past rather than the now.
You talk about this technology being relatively new in the UK, albeit that it's been over in the States for a long time. Is there an issue that courts might not be aware of the availability of this sort of testing, and therefore is there an education piece here as well, Sophie, that needs to be done?
Absolutely. So I do believe, more and more, I mean, we've seen court orders coming through already where drug patch and breathalyzer are actually being ordered in the courts. As you said, it has been used in the US previously. So essentially, for the UK market, if you like, and for, professionals over in the UK, it is new technology, but it's new technology in that we just haven't used it over here previously. I mean, it's tried and tested over in the US. And I mean, yeah, education wise, absolutely, it just needs to be kind of brought to the forefront more. And it is, is a new type of testing. So, there are many, many benefits for it. And I think the more kind of we can educate people, and especially professionals as well, to show the benefits and the alternative type of testing for which may suit their clients a lot more. I definitely feel, these could be products well received moving forward.
And I think the biggest thing, just to add to that, Soph, is that the feedback we're getting is the deterrent side of things. So it really does support your clients themselves, because it's a massive deterrent when they're actually wearing that patch or they've got that breath test with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you've only got
to...
Definitely. I mean, with the patch, you've only got to look down and it's there. So you are, you're thinking automatically, well, I need to not do whatever I might have been thinking of doing. And again, with the breathalyzer, it is that deterrent.
I've got images of those nicotine patches that people wear when they're trying to give up smoking. It's a similar sort of concept.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour through testing and new types of testing. As I say, we've covered hair strand testing on the podcast previously, and I'm very grateful to both Donna and to Sophie for coming on the podcast and sharing their insights. So thank you very much to both of you for joining.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
The Today's Family Lawyer podcast is available on your preferred podcast provider. It's also available on todaysfamilylawyer.co.uk. My thanks to Donna and to Sophie. Thank you as ever for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
Vacancy Legal Recruitment, a refreshingly unique and personal talent agency developed specifically for legal. Dedicated to the sector and with extensive experience working across legal services and legal technology, we bridge the gap between your requirements and top-tier legal talent. Get in touch today and say hello at vacancy.co.uk.